The Gemara says that Jews should attempt to see the pomp and circumstance of royalty so that they would then have a chance to appreciate the greatness that is due Kaviyachol to the King of Kings. So today on the internet I watched the state visit of President Trump to Great Britain, and I have to admit that no one does royalty like the English. And she's remarkable. She's 93 years old, you know. She makes me feel like a young man. So altogether, it was an exhilarating experience. The Americans are buffoons when it comes to that. They're like, you can see he doesn't know what to do. Nobody knows what to do. And they're blowing and marching. And this week's parsha, we have the parsha of Sotah. I mentioned yesterday the parsha of naso that exists. So the Gemara says, Rashi quotes it, Sotah b'kulkula, Yazer asmo in ayayin, that, so to speak, the causation for the justification of nazir, which is problematic. The Torah is not in great support of such measures. The justification for it is the occurrence of the incident of sotah. Now, sotah, it's an entire masechta in the Talmud. And so it deals with a woman that is suspected of infidelity, and we cannot prove it. The husband, however, is apparently certain. And so it says that he has a ruach kina, he has a zealotry that entered him, and he demands that she participate in this ceremony of the sotah. Now, from the Gemara, it appears that this ceremony took place in temple times. It was not a theoretical thing. In fact, the Gemara says that the great queen Hilni Amalka, who was a non-Jewish queen, had owned an apartment in the old city, and she would come a number of times a year to visit. And she had a son, Munvaz, who was the king in the outlying Parthian Empire, and who the Gemara also treats as being a very righteous, moral, holy person. And so she donated to the Beit HaMikdash a golden plaque on which was inscribed the entire parsha of Sotah, so that if the Kohen had to write the parsha before it was placed into the waters and dissolved, the text was present on the wall of the Beit HaMikdash of the Second Temple. That was a donation that she gave to the Beit HaMikdash. So at first blush, it's a strange donation. And one would have thought that the thrust would have been to hide such matters or to downplay them and not to publicize it in such a fashion. But apparently, Chazal saw the parsha of Sotah as being the antidote to a very immoral society, Roman society. And throughout civilization, we have waves of this. There are waves of times when immorality is not only prevalent, but it accepted and is the norm. And then you have waves of time when it isn't that it doesn't exist, but that it is not acceptable and not treated as a positive value in society. So sotah came to remove the acceptability of it. It also opens up for us, it's a very mysterious parsha, because if she drinks the waters, if she's innocent, then the waters are a boon to her. They give her health and fertility, long life. And if she's guilty, then the waters eventually will be the source of her death. And as the Gemara points out, the waters not only test her, but they test the husband as well. Because the Torah is not hypocritical. He wants his wife to live to a certain standard. So what about him? So this entire process is one that is mysterious. But so it's referred to heaven. That's basically what it is. We can't decide. It's a little like the Mueller report. We can't decide, so we pass the buck, right? So let heaven decide. Which is the concept that exists in the Gemara. We have a concept of chaya b'dinei shemayim. Poter b'dinei odom, chaya b'dinei shemayim. So we have that concept as far as monetary damages are concerned. A injures B. For technical reasons, A will not be found to have to pay money. Whatever. And that you have all of Seder Nezikin, and you have Bava Kama, he's not going to pay money. He's potter. But potter is b'dinei odom. But sometimes the person still remains liable, chayav b'dinei shemayim. The Gemara gives us cases like that. Potter b'dinei odom, chayav b'dinei shemayim. We have the same thing by Shabbos, for instance, that the Gemara says, potter avaloser. It's potter, he doesn't have to bring a korban. He's not a machal of Shabbos, but he shouldn't do it. It's also to do it. So this is based on the idea that heaven views human behavior in a more sophisticated and deeper way than human beings can. So we are naturally bound by ein l'dayan elamash ein of rose. We can't do more than what we see. Al pi shnayim eidim yokum davar. You have to have two legitimate witnesses. These are constraints that prevent us from perhaps exacting what we feel to be justice. Can't do anything about it. But the dinei shamayim, they are not at all constrained by these limits. In dinei shamayim, they see what the situation really was, and therefore a person can be poter b'dinei odom and chayav b'dinei shamayim. And this concept exists throughout Jewish thought and Musar and Chassidus and whatever you want to say. Always this thought that ultimately we're responsible to Dinei Shemayim. And Dinei Shemayim has different rules. So here we have this woman. So there's ground there are grounds for what is going on. There has to be kinui and stira. She had to be warned not to be with this man. We know that she was with the man. We just don't know. We don't have a video of what happened in the room. Can't prove it. But there certainly are grounds for suspicion. And so now, since we can't do anything, we, so to speak, refer it to heaven. So there's a Taisus in Brochus, and there's a Taisus there that says an interesting thing. Taisus says if two people have a dispute, God forbid, two Jews have a dispute, and one feels that he has been terribly and severely wronged, but he realizes that he cannot, for whatever reasons, obtain justice here in a court, in a bezdin, in society. He can't. So Taisus says he should never refer the matter to heaven. Just take it. Sign the check. Don't refer it to heaven. Because Taisus says you refer it to heaven, so then they'll start with you. I mean, that's the underlying point here. The underlying point is that we want heaven to lose the file, so to speak. We don't, like the greatest joy that we have with Masach Nasa is that they lost your file. So they can't bother you.
Unless they owe you.
Even if they owe me, I've done it many times, like I'm entitled to a refund on my income tax. I never file for it. Because who wants them to look at this? Of course, the refund is not in great numbers, but nevertheless, I'm not interested that they should do it. So you don't refer things to Dinei Shemayim, Taisus says. Even though you're convinced you're right, and you're convinced that somehow you've been wronged, and you cannot get justice here, nevertheless, you should go out of your way not to refer it to Dinei Shemayim. The Gemara goes even further, where it says a person that sins should not confess his sins publicly, which is something that all of our politicians agree with. He said today that we're not a Medina of Halacha. We are a Medina of Halacha. This is the Halacha. Why? Because then you open up a whole Pandora's box. You open up a whole problem here. And only that people talk about it. And when people talk about it, what people talk about is itself a problem. So it's between you and heaven, so to speak. So that's why we have the Yom Noraim, we have Elul, we have the Baser Shemei Tshuva, but that's all private. It's all private because of the fact that Dinei Shemayim is a difficult thing. But to publicize these things, so the same thing is with sotah, why they were not so much in favor of it, because that's what people will talk about. That becomes the topic of conversation. And things that become the topic of conversation eventually become acceptable in society. Eventually it's lo nora, because you see that we talk about it. We've had many, many examples over the past few decades of how things that were unthinkable are today the norm, simply because we talked about it. It was publicized. And that's the way to do it. So there's a lot of messages in this parsha of Sotah, even though in all practicality and reality today we have no relationship to it. We don't know, we don't understand it, etc. But there's a deep psychological and spiritual message that has relevance to us, and that relevance to us should be appreciated on how we behave and how we think as well. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Omer Ratzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lazak L'Yisrael Lefichach Chirbu Lahem Torah Mitzvot Shenemar Adonai Chafetz L'Ma'as Tzidkau Yaviu Torah V'Yaviu. Amen.